coming up.
Canadians want to know. Well, you're the $9 million man. They want to know what the value is for Canadians. Sir, keep your bags packed in that new place. Conservatives are going to fire you.
You said at the outset you'd rather be in Central Park. Now you're overlooking Central Park. You got your wish, sir.
Have the documents, Mr. Clark. We have the documents that indicate that you personally greenlighted this project.
There were about 80 people there, including the mayor of New York City and including the head of BlackRock Investments.
From your perspective, was the purpose of that tour?
As head of mission, I was aware that this was going on. Once the offer had been made, I was curious.
Okay. Sorry, the appraisal was done on May the 9th, but you visited it on April 26th. Why were you visiting a condo that an offer had been made on but hadn't been appraised? How did the price get arrived at? Does that, I know you're not an expert in real estate, but wouldn't you get it appraised before you make an offer?
You simply walked around aimlessly, looking at all the features, not asking any questions, and them not highlighting certain features to you. Is that what you want Canadians to believe? Yes or no, Mr. Clark?
Oh, yes.
Wow. Wow. You have found the most inept real estate agent in the entire world.
Were any of your children employed by Mr. Finkelstein's company at the time when you recommended the appointment?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that seem like a problem to you?
Mr. Finkelstein is one of Canada's greatest entrepreneurs.
He might be a great guy, sir. I've never met him, but the point is, your members of your immediate family were employed by him, and you used a position in government to recommend him for a position at the same time as members of your family were on the board.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Clark, we're going to hand things over to you for 5 minutes for your opening statement. Please go ahead, sir. You're on mute, Mr. Clark. Sorry, Mr. Clark, if you can hear me, you're on mute.
Got it.
There we go.
My apologies. You would think I would know something about this. Let me refer to my opening statement. Mr. Chair and Committee, first of all, good afternoon, and let me start by commending this committee for taking up this matter. When governments sell and buy official residence involving millions of dollars, parliamentary scrutiny is completely understandable. At a time when many Canadians, and including many Americans, are facing housing challenges, they have the right to know why and how decisions are made to buy and sell official accommodations. Finally, I would like to tell you why I accepted this job as Consul General in the first place. After a 45-year career in broadcasting and 5 years as a senior business executive, I was looking for an opportunity to give back because I believe that anyone who has done well because of Canada, or in my case, because of Canadians, should give something back to the country that gave them so much. This job allows me to do just that, using my experience and my personal networks in the service of Canada. I am extremely proud of the work my team here in New York does for Canadians, advancing and protecting their interests every single day. Mr. Chairman, I now look forward to answering any questions that the members may have.
Thanks, Mr. Clark. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Clark, how long were you residing in the old residence?
How long was I residing? Well, from the time I arrived, February 27th, 2023, until today.
The listing for that property describes it as a masterpiece. Is that right? Is that how it's described?
I know nothing about real estate.
Well, you're here to talk about it today, so I hope you're prepared to turn your mind to it. The Prime Minister visited you in New York City on April 27th of that year that you moved in. Is that right?
I believe that's correct. He was here on a mission. Yep.
Did you host the Prime Minister in the residence?
I did.
Did you show him around?
Around the residence? No.
Yeah. No, you didn't show him around.
Nope.
What did he comment on the look of it?
No.
So, but to confirm that on April 27th, you and the Prime Minister were in the residence that was deemed unfit for you to continue living in. That's correct. You were there April 27th.
Yeah, along with about 80 other people.
And on April 28th, you were in the limo with him in New York. Is that right? The next day?
That's correct.
So, were there any conversations regarding renovations, upgrade, moving, the former occupants of that condo, or you now occupying it? Any change in discussions regarding which representative in New York was occupying that space? Did that come up at all?
None whatsoever.
So we have government documents that detail how talks on getting a new residence intensified immediately after the Prime Minister visited you. You asked him for a new place, is that right?
That's incorrect.
So you're in the motorcade with the Prime Minister after he was just in this place that's deemed unfit for you to continue to live in, and you never said, look, buddy, thanks for the job. I could use a new jeweled onyx powder room and a handcrafted copper tub.
No, I did not.
How much representational space is there in the new residence?
Representational space would represent the majority of the space in the new residence.
Okay, that's interesting. So the dining room, living room, jeweled onyx powder room come to about 860 square feet. Does that sound about right to you? That's what the listing says.
I have no idea about square feet. I would refer you to the property division at Global Affairs who handles this.
So that leaves about 2,700 square feet for your personal use. 860 for representational, 2,700 for your personal use. So Canadians are on the hook for paying $9 million for 860 square feet when a perfectly good joint representational space is available at the same property that you're joining us at from today. Is that right?
Your numbers can't be right because that does not represent reality.
Okay, so what is the percentage of representational space in the new location? Please bring us back to reality.
That is a question, Mr. Chair, that should be addressed to the property division at Global Affairs Canada.
Well, you had a great deal of certainty to tell me that I'm wrong, but you certainly don't know on what basis I am. I'm referring to exactly the documents that were provided to us by the department that you're now referring me to. GAC's real estate agent told us that you personally visited the new luxury condo once the selection had been made. Was this a final vetting?
Not at all. It was after the offer had been made to buy it that I first saw it.
Did you ever take a moment, as someone who spent a career in journalism, to question the Prime Minister or anyone on the opulence of this location amid the backdrop of the cost of living crisis that we're facing here in Canada? StatsCan saying that 1 in 4 Canadians are going to be using food banks to feed themselves and their families this month. Did that ever occur to you?
As I said in my opening statement, Mr. Chair, I am well aware of the challenges being faced by both Canadians and Americans when it comes to housing. In this case, I was not involved in any way, shape, or form in the decision to buy this new residence or sell the old residence. And that is entirely in the hands of the property division of Global Affairs.
When you host functions at the event, do you personally prepare the food? Is it done by your personal chef, or are these events catered?
I do not have a personal chef, nor do I cook the food, thankfully.
So these are catered affairs, because we were told by the real property division that the necessity for this was that the shared space that you have at the office that you're in now wasn't suitable to host functions because there wasn't a kitchen to prepare meals. So if the meals are being brought in, couldn't they be brought into your office that you're speaking to us from now?
The bylaws of New York City prohibit us from having a working kitchen in the office. It would be illegal, in fact, for us to put a working kitchen in this office.
If it's catered, it seems moot whether or not you have a kitchen in there. We've been told that you're responsible for all of the trade success between Canada and the United States. Can you tell us exactly, just the number, how much trade business you have generated for Canada? Just the number, sir.
First of all, Mr.
For a
Chair, I
number.
don't know where or who said that I was responsible for all the trade between Canada and
Well,
the United States.
since you don't have the number, I'm out of time. Canadians want to know.
Well,
You're the $9 million man. They want to know what the value is for Canadians. Sir, keep your bags packed in that new place. Conservatives are going to fire you.
Thanks, Mr. Barrett. We're going to go to Mr. Jawari for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, let me welcome Mr. Clark. Thank you for coming to the committee, and thank you for clarifying a number of things. And I strongly suggest you do not unpack anything. We need you. We need you now more than ever.
I'm interested in starting, my colleagues have asked important questions about the timing of things, and I think we're getting a little bit better sense of how this decision was made. I'm wondering if you can talk about the longer-term investment in Canada's diplomatic corps and how that has changed over time. Now, I understand you're relatively new to this role, but you obviously talk to other people in the diplomatic corps and probably have a sense of where we stand at this current moment when it comes to investing. I don't think anyone would deny that in order to be effective in these roles, the government has to invest in them. And we've seen different decisions made by different governments over time. Where do we stand now, and where have we been in the past?
I am, as you say, the wrong person to ask about history, but I can perhaps be helpful talking about what I have been able to see here during my time here. And that is that when we invest in diplomacy, we get results. When we do it properly, and that is to say efficiently, using money as wisely as we possibly can, it increases the effectiveness of what we would do or what we are doing. I really don't have many views. I haven't seen our other residences or offices. I did as a journalist when I traveled the world. And I think that I guess what I would say is this. We are a G7 country. We are important on the world stage. We are going to be even more important on the world stage as we transition in many, many areas of production. And I think that we have to understand that while our friends are our friends in the G20 and the G70, they're also our competitors here in places like New York. They're after the same pie that I'm after. So that we have to be nimble, we have to be effective, we have to do it as best we can, keeping the taxpayer in mind and understanding that the more efficient that we can be, the better we are.
Go ahead, Mr. Brock, please.
Mr. Clark, although you have not been sworn or affirmed to tell the truth, every witness that testifies at parliamentary committee is expected to tell the truth. Have you, sir, told the truth to the committee so far?
I have, every word of it.
I have a package of emails from the government, emails from the Chief of Staff to the Assistant Deputy Minister of Trudeau's Minister of Global Affairs, Melanie Jolie. She wrote a summary of the $9 million condo purchase. The email states, and I quote, "Both the Consul General of New York and the head of mission," that's you, Tom Clark, "have been instrumental throughout the process with the head of mission," again, you, Mr. Clark, "providing the green light for the selection of the new residence. It is in writing by the department. Tom Clark, you, sir, was instrumental in the condo purchase on Billionaires Row." So again, Mr. Clark, when did you raise the need for a new residence with the Liberal government?
Mr. Chair, I will repeat, I had no role whatsoever in deciding to sell the old residence, buying the new residence, or its amenities, or its location. That email that you're referring to has a couple of addendums to it that I think are important. Number one, it was corrected. That was a person who was not involved in the process of this. I only became aware of this email less than 48 hours ago. I, too, was taken aback by what was in it because it was simply wrong. It wasn't
Stop you.
true.
Mr. Clark, let me stop you right there. I don't believe you. Canadians don't believe you. Are you trying to suggest that a head of mission in any country in the world would be completely shut out, would be completely uninvolved with the acquisition of your own residence? No Canadian believes you, sir. This was not a typo. This was a deliberate, focused sentence regarding your involvement. And the timing, sir, is crucial. The email I referenced was sent out June 17th, 2024. The story of the $9 million condo on Billionaires Row became known to the Canadian public on July the 11th. That was a huge embarrassment to the Canadian government, and I'm sure a huge embarrassment to you, Mr. Clark. Your involvement was documented well before. We have the receipts. The department's pathetic attempt to cover up for you was issued on July 25, after all of the controversy, after all of the pushback from politicians, from Canadians who are struggling to put a roof over their head, who are lined up at food banks, who are starving. People who go to the food banks were actually, donating to the food banks. And you're sitting on Billionaires Row, sipping coffee from a $6,000 coffee machine. You can appreciate how appalling that is to Canadians. So again, sir, I ask for honesty. When did you bring up the need for a new residence?
Mr. Chair, I will repeat once again, and please, if you wish, you can put me under oath on this. I had nothing to do with the decision to sell the old OR. I had nothing to do with the decision to buy the new OR. I had nothing to do with deciding on amenities or its location.
It's funny, Mr. Clark. 19 previous consul generals to New York since 1961 have all enjoyed the lavish amenities, the wonderful location in Midtown Manhattan of the Park Avenue residence until you, sir, were appointed to the position. And within months, sir, of you appointing the position, and within months of Justin Trudeau visiting you and you hanging out in a motorcade in downtown New York with streets closed, all of a sudden, there's a talk about a new residence and a push to get you into Billionaires Row. You said at the outset, you'd rather be in Central Park. Now you're overlooking Central Park. You got your wish, sir.
Mr. Brock, I am not overlooking Central Park.
Okay.
I'm not
sorry,
in
Mr.
a
Clark.
tower.
I have to interrupt. That is our time, but I think you'll probably have a chance to respond for our next intervention, Mr. Baines.
I assure you I won't bully or intimidate like my members across the way who seem to be inspired by the recent American presidential debate and wanting to fire people. Can you speak to your plans going into the fall and the new year for growing Canada's business footprint in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of things coming up that we're extraordinarily proud of. Last year, we started our first conference on critical minerals here in New York. What we did is we invited down junior miners from Canada, people who have got known deposits of critical minerals, and we brought them together with investors here in the United States to see if we could make a match. I'm pleased to say that, in most business dealings, as anybody involved in business will tell you, it doesn't happen overnight. This is a process. Investment is a process. And along the lines, we're there to try and accelerate that, to try and widen the opportunities for those investments to be made. But at that conference on critical minerals last year, right there, I think there were one or two investment deals made. We're looking for patient capital here in New York. Patient capital is important for critical minerals, and that's important for us. And then going ahead, we have a number of what we call CTAs. Climate Tech Accelerators is a very big one for us, bringing down Canadian technology, looking for investors in the energy transition mode. We do this for a whole range of industries, but climate tech is a very big one coming up in Climate Week here in New York later this month, as a matter of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark, you referred to this communique that indicated that you did, in fact, have a role in the selection of the new apartment. And then you referred to the amendments there too by global affairs officials. And for people who are following along and perhaps watching the webcast of this meeting, could you characterize the rationale for the amendments for, in your own words, for folks who are watching?
Sure. The memo that you're referring to, or the email that you're referring to, was simply wrong. These things happen. People get things wrong. All the other documents that you have point the other direction. So this is unfortunate. It was unfortunate for the person who wrote it because it was simply wrong. I mean, what can I tell you? It's not what happened.
It's just hard to imagine someone writing a memo and including information that has absolutely no basis. I can't imagine, I'm thinking about officials that are writing these memos, and I'm struggling to understand why someone would put something in there when it's entirely unfactual. Do we know who wrote the memo, who was responsible for that fairly grievous oversight?
Yes, we do. It's in the package. Nothing is redacted in that, by the way. And her name is Emily Nicholson. I have not ever met Emily Nicholson or spoken to Emily Nicholson, but I share with you the astonishment that something would be written that is so completely wrong.
Mr. Chair, perhaps it would be appropriate for the committee to invite Ms. Nicholson to appear as part of this study and provide, in her own words, her rationale for writing the original memo in the way that she did. If that's in order, I would make that a motion at this time.
Yeah, colleagues,
Or
Mr.
maybe we can do it by unanimous consent.
Yeah, we seem to have agreement with that, so leave it with myself and the clerk. Thanks, Mr. Backrack. You've got about 5 seconds.
I'll hand those seconds back to you, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Backrack. We're now going to go to Mrs. Kusi for 5. Then we're going to take a very short suspension so we can do a voice check for Mr. Hardy. And then we'll continue with Mr. Hardy. Go ahead, Mrs. Kusi.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Clark, it's very concerning because there are some inconsistencies in the timelines and the testimony that you are giving the committee today. So I'm just going to outline the first one that is very concerning to me as well as the committee. So you get appointed in February of 2023. Then we see you in a motorcade April 28th of 2023 with the Prime Minister, the individual who does the appointments. And in that video, in the motorcade, you say that, in fact, the Prime Minister was over at your place the evening before, the residence of the 27th. And then, lo and behold, Global Affairs Canada, that had put the project of a new residence on hold, all of a sudden, after your appointment, your dinner with the Prime Minister, and then being in the motorcade with the Prime Minister, Global Affairs Canada decides that there are issues with the current residence and that it is time to look for a new residence, apparently a $9 million residence. Isn't that convenient? So can you elaborate for the committee again, please? What was your implication in discussing the new residence with the department and with the Prime Minister? When did you first bring it up with the Prime Minister? Because the chronology would definitely, the chronological timeline would definitely indicate that you had conversations with the Prime Minister about the residence. Because isn't that funny that you would be appointed, You would have dinner with the Prime Minister. You would be in a motorcade with the Prime Minister. And lo and behold, Global Affairs Canada decides that it's time for a new residence after that visit. Isn't that funny? So just tell the committee now when you have the conversations with the Prime Minister about the new residence, because that's what happened. Isn't that right, Mr. Clark?
No, Mr. Chair, it's completely wrong. I never spoke with the Prime Minister about the old residence or the new residence or any residence. The Prime Minister was not over at the residence for dinner. It wasn't just he and I. There were about 80 people there, including the mayor of New York City and including the head of BlackRock Investments, as well as a number of other people. But the core of your question is, when did I or did I ever speak to anybody about this? The answer is unequivocally no.
Well, Mr. Clark, it's very hard for myself to believe this. It's very hard for this committee to be this. So let's stop the lying. I'm going to go to another timeline, which is just not very supportive of your testimony that you have not had these conversations with the Prime Minister. Okay, so there's an email from internal to Global Affairs Canada stating your involvement, outlining your involvement, that's sent on June 17th of this year. All of a sudden, in the media, which I know is your friend, a story breaks on July 11th of the $9 million condo purchase. Then this email, this internal email, is sent on July 25th, which shows that you personally have green-lighted this project. And lo and behold, this July 25th, or correcting it on July 25th, further to the July 11th email, which highlights your green lighting. But this July 25th email, lo and behold, it is one day after the committee passes the motion demanding your appearance. So again, this is another timeline which is very damning to your evidence, to your testimony here today, Mr. Clark. So why don't we just stop the lying? When did you have a conversation with the Prime Minister about the necessity for a new residence? Just tell the committee, please.
You know, Mr. Chair, when we get to the point of accusing people of lying, I think that we are in very, very dangerous territory here. I will state once again for the member, I had nothing to do with the decision to sell the old residence or to buy the new residence. I did not speak to the Prime Minister about either of those transactions.
Have the documents, Mr. Clark. We have the documents that indicate that you personally greenlighted this project. And lo and behold, so conveniently, after your time with the Prime Minister back in 2023, shortly after he appointed you, we know that you have had conversations with the Prime Minister about purchasing this $9 million residence on the backs of Canadians. And now we have the email trail that proves that as well. You have tried to cover it. Global Affairs Canada has tried to cover it, but the email paper trail does not lie. And so I'm not buying this. This committee isn't buying this, Mr. Clark, and Canadians aren't buying it.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sorry, let me interrupt for a sec. That is our time. We'll do your point of order, then we'll suspend quickly so we can get Mr. Hardy checked voice-wise. Go ahead, Mr. Short.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that Ms. Kuzi wants to use the term we and the committee.
Is he setting a standing order in this point of order, Chair?
Yeah,
Please let him finish the point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Short.
Thank you. I just take point with the fact that not every member of this committee is of the same opinion as Ms. Kuzi is.
Which standing order is he citing in this point of order?
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Genuous, please let him. Yeah. Are you finished, Mr. Jari?
Yeah, so just wanted to be on the record. The Liberals are not in the same opinion as Ms. Kuzi is.
Is this a point of order?
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a fellow recovering broadcaster, Mr. Clark, I think it's always worthwhile to look at the current situation and then look for normative information. Is this new? And in fact, it isn't. I want to quote a 2010 media report at a time when we're trying to recover from the financial collapse. The report said as follows: federal spending on Canadian embassy properties and diplomatic residences abroad soared 430% since Stephen Harper's Conservative government came to power on a promise to rein in the diplomatic decorators. After years of trying to move from owning embassies to leasing them, Foreign Affairs is now building a number of new ones, including in Moscow, 8.3 million, Damascus, 6.4 million, Prague, 4.8 million, Dhaka, Bangladesh, 4.2 million, and Stockholm, 4 million. The media report went on to say construction of a new embassy in Pakistan has already cost more than $7 million just for the land and preliminary plans. The largest single embassy project detailed in the public accounts in 2009 was in Kabul, as Canada prepared to withdraw from its combat mission in Afghanistan and expand its civilian presence there. Spending on the project in the past year, that is in 2009, topped $20 million, including $9 million for renovations, $11 million to buy property, and another $1.4 million to clear the possible landmines. So this is kind of the history of what has gone on in the past. Next to that, the situation in New York in this age of rage, as we're witnessing this morning, seems to be quite mild. And so I wanted to turn back to you, Mr. Clark, to talk about the importance of the efforts that Canada makes. We saw U.S. protectionism under President Trump. It's not out of the question that we can see more protectionism, or at least moves in that direction, under whichever administration we have after November. Can you talk about the value and the depth and scope of the relationship building, and why perhaps operating out of a no-tell-motel somewhere in the precinct of New York City wouldn't necessarily send the right message to the people that we're basically trying to reach?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think one of the ways to explain that is to take a look at the 5 states that I am responsible for. And in each one of those 5 states, Canada is the number one customer of theirs. In other words, we buy more from these states than the 3 other buyers, Japan, China, France, the European Union combined. So we are extraordinarily important to these states in that also about 70% of the stuff that we send down to the United States ends up as inputs into American products. We are so closely integrated. And I think that the challenge for Canada is to continue to talk to American legislators of either party and say that we have become so integrated that to try and separate that not only would be hugely costly and almost impossible to do from a regulatory point of view, but it'd be dumb, quite frankly, because it would hurt both Canada and the United States. We're entering into an era now, and this is what I often say, is that the route to the Americans achieving their goals and what they want to do runs right through Canada. And for Canada to achieve our goals, our road runs through the United States. It is no longer a question of buy America or buy Canada. It should be buy North America. We have to be thinking in terms of resilient supply chains. We have to be thinking in terms of the next time the world gets knocked down by a pandemic or a war, all of these things are possible, that we have supply chains that can literally be accessed within a couple of hours because we're literally just up the road. And we have in Canada the materials that are so necessary for the next phase of the global economy. We're in a terrific position in this country. It's a question of us seizing the opportunities that are there. And that is really the bulk of our work, regardless of the outcome of the American election.
Is it possible to say that we have good friends in the United States?
Oh, we have extremely good friends in the United States, and this has been one of the big takeaways for me as I travel around and I meet so many American politicians, business leaders, and so on. It's hard to find somebody who doesn't like Canada.
Great. Well, let's hope the age of rage is coming to an end and we can get on with being civil to each other internationally as well as domestically. Mr. Chair, that's all the time I need. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Mr. Genwis, please, for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Clark, it's clearly on the record that you toured the new residence. Could you tell us, please, when you first toured the new residence?
I have that here, Mr. Chair. It was April 26th, after the offer to buy had been made.
April 26th of, okay. So
Yeah.
an offer had been put in, but the purchase hadn't been finalized. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. What, from your perspective, was the purpose of that tour?
As head of mission, I was aware that this was going on. Once the offer had been made, I was curious.
Okay. Offer's been made, purchase hasn't been finalized. You're toured around this building, you're shown, the coffee maker, the golf simulator, the bedroom, the bathroom, etc. Is it reasonable to presume that people who were touring you asked what you thought of the place?
No, nobody, not even the people from the mission asked me what I thought of it.
So you were going on a tour with these folks, and at no point did they say, "Well, it looks pretty nice, eh?" Or what do you think of this feature, Mr. Clark? It was kind of a silent walkabout. Is that sort of how it unfolded, or?
I was curious as to what it was that they had put an offer in, and I had a look.
Right.
Nobody asked me.
You had a look, but usually when someone has a look at something, there's a conversation that unfolds, right? So it would be unusual if you went on this tour of this new property and you were not asked and offered no comment whatsoever on the nature of the place, its suitability or not, etc. But you would have this committee believe that in the course of this tour, there was no conversation about any of those things.
There was no conversation about whether I would approve or disapprove of what they were doing, because that wasn't in my realm of responsibility. I don't do.
No, but you took time out of your day. You've talked about all the work you're doing there. Clearly, you're busy.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Point of order. Sorry, I can't see who it is. Go ahead.
It's MP Chahal here.
Go ahead, Mr. Chahal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My point of order, I've heard it from a number of speakers and previously from Ms. Kuzi and Mr. Brock, particularly prior to that. And now Mr. Jennis is also leaning into his mic, speaking quite loud and aggressively. And,
Mr. Chahal, what is your point of order, please?
My point of order is for the health and safety of interpreters.
Mr. Chahal, let me just say this once, because I seem to have to say it every single time to new people on this committee. If there is an issue with the interpreters, they will contact the clerk. You do not need to interrupt the proceedings. Thank you very much.
Can I speak, Mr. Macaulay? If I could just finish. All I'm saying is...
No, that's not a point of order. If there's an issue, Mr. Chahal, the interpreters will advise the clerk, but I do appreciate your concern for them.
I would just ask respectively if speakers could not speak so loudly or yell into the mics.
That's not a point of order.
If he could not speak at all, we'd appreciate that.
Mr. Jenoweth, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for showing Mr. Chahal how a committee chair is supposed to operate. Mr. Clark, back to you. You're describing this scenario that seems kind of fanciful to me, right? The purchase has not been complete yet. An offer's been made, but the purchase has not been complete. And you are brought to tour the property. Now, normally, when somebody is touring a property that they might live in the course of that tour, a conversation is going to happen about the suitability of the place. If you were staying miles away from this decision, it would have been natural for you to not go on the tour. Ostensibly, you had a reason for going on the tour, though. So when you went on this tour, before the property had been purchased, you were shown the glorious features and amenities of this property. You would have us believe that you said absolutely nothing about them, that nobody asked, does this seem like a suitable place? There was no back and forth whatsoever. You just looked at it, were silent, and then walked back to your office. That's what your testimony is?
That's what my testimony is. I was curious.
Okay. This is sort of, you understand that the tour of silence on top of the email which says you were involved kind of suggest that members of this committee and of the public have a reason to be a bit skeptical about aspects of your testimony. I want to try to get one more question in. The government is purchasing a $9 million luxury condo for you to live in. We understand that a consul general would entertain guests in their residence, but obviously the whole residence is not for entertainment. You're not going to be inviting prospective investors into your bedroom, for example. Now, we have the floor plan of the new space. Would you accept that this luxury condo has a much smaller percentage of representational space, and the trade-off is much less representational space and much more luxurious personal space? Would you acknowledge that based on what you've seen in the tour?
No.
But sir, we have the floor plans. You're not entertaining people in every part of this space. The personal space is a much larger proportion, and it's much more luxurious than in the previous residence, which leans much more towards representational space. That's pretty clear in the floor plans, but you're denying that?
Yeah.
Perfect. That is our time. Mr. Chahal, we'll go to you, sir, please, for 5 minutes. Sorry, Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, you're up, please, for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, now that you're allowing me to speak. Mr. Clark, thank you for providing testimony today. And then earlier on, Madame Vanolia just had mentioned or asked you a question regarding the usage of your space, and I think your time ran out. So I just wanted to provide you the opportunity as I begin my questioning, the role and the importance of your space, and if you wanted to add anything that you didn't get to add when you were asked that question earlier.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it, and may I take this occasion to apologize to Madame Vinola for not being completely conversant in French enough to have given her the full answer in French. But allow me to go to some documents here, which will help sort of understand what we do in terms of the space. The 38 events that I've held, dinners, lunches, and breakfasts at the official residence and receptions as well, have always had one thing at its core, and that is it is a time to bring Canadians and Americans together. If I'm having a conference or a dinner, for example, on private equity and how that affects Canada, or venture capital and how that affects Canadian companies, I have down Canadian experts in that area, and we sit around a table with Americans. And that is a very effective way of bringing people together and advancing Canada's case here in New York City. We do, the receptions themselves tend to be rather small as opposed to the larger ones that we would do here at the Mission, because we have the ability to have 80 or 100 people here at the Mission. But I think that, as everybody knows, official residences, whether they be political or whether they be diplomatic, are often used in a way to advance our cause. Advocacy is at the heart of everything that we do, and we use the tools that are available to us to do it, whether it be a residence or a mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark, if you'll humor me, I'd like to return to this question of the memo and your role or non-role in the process, and parse some of the words in the original memo and the amended memo. Now, by my reading, there are 3 steps in this process. This is sort of a 3-step ditty. You need to identify the need to find a new property. So there was the process of identifying the shortcomings with the existing property and the need to replace it. So that was the first step. The second step was to select a new property, which included, as we've heard as a committee, looking at a number of different properties in the neighborhood in New York. And then the third step was the approval of that selection and the decision to make the purchase. Does that seem like a fair characterization of the overall process?
As I understand it, yes.
So going back to the June 17th memo, it states that both the mission, including the head of mission and the property team in Ottawa, agreed on the need to identify a replacement property. Now, to me, that reads like step number 1. It's identifying a need, and at the very start of the process. Now, the amendment on July 25th, rather, states neither head of mission was part of the selection or approval process for the overall process or the property purchase. Now, that strikes me as referring to steps 2 and 3 in that 3-step process. So, I'm concerned that the amendments seem to be parsing these words and referring to different parts of the process to avoid mistruths. And I'm not going to jump the shark like my conservative colleagues have and accuse you of lying. But is it not true that this amended version on July 25th could in fact be true, and that you could have also had a role in identifying the need for a new apartment?
Chair, that's a completely legitimate question, and perhaps I can clarify it. I agree with you that there are 3 steps to this, and the first step has to be the decision to move on, to sell the residence and look for something else. Let me make it abundantly clear, as I said in my opening statement, I had absolutely no role, no discussion, nothing to do with the decision to sell the old residence and move elsewhere. So that takes care of step number 1. I just wanted to give you that clarification.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Barrett, please go ahead.
So let's say a Canadian who didn't know Prime Minister Justin Trudeau went to buy a condo on their own, and let's break down those numbers. Say they have 20% down payment. Let's say they get a great mortgage rate, which is tough after 9 years of Justin Trudeau and the economic vandalism that he's perpetrated on Canadians. That'd work out to about $42,000 a month for your residence. How much do you pay in rent each month for your official residence? Just the number, please.
$1,800.
$1,800 on $42,000 a month. So it's fair to say that you're getting a massive subsidy worth tens of thousands of dollars for your rent every single month. Is that right?
No.
Okay, so what's the cost and what are you paying, Mr. Clark? Because the difference is being paid by someone. That someone is Canadian taxpayers. So it's being subsidized by the government of Canada. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. I pay what the department asks me to pay. I have no role in negotiating that. That's in the that's in my
who pays the rest? Who pays the rest? It's your answer was $1,800. So Canadians are subsidizing you by the tune of $40,000, $40,200. I think it's unbelievable when you look at the context. 1 in 4 Canadians relying on food banks this fall to feed their families. Do you think that that is acceptable for Canadians, that they're subsidizing your rent during a housing and homelessness crisis in our country, that you're getting a more than $40,000 per month rent subsidy paid for by Canadian taxpayers?
I don't understand your numbers. We're returning more than $7 million to Canadian taxpayers. That's the important number in here.
Sorry, you couldn't do that for less than $40,000 a month in rent? Is that your contention?
I don't know where this $40,000 comes from. Perhaps you could explain that to me.
Well, I did, sir, and I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. It was very straightforward. The terms that Canadians would have to enter into to live in the kind of place that they're furnishing you with, it would come at a price of more than $40,000, $42,000 a month, just for the cost of the residence, to say nothing of the taxes and utilities that they would have to pay. You're only paying $1,800 a month. Is there anywhere else on Billionaires Row that you can rent for $1,800 a month? Let's see if that makes it easier for you to understand the difference for Canadians. Is there anywhere else, any of your neighbors, are they able to pay $1,800 a month?
I have said from the beginning, I'm not in real estate. I don't go around asking people what they pay for rent. So I would not be very helpful to you in that regard.
I question your helpfulness on a range of things. Certainly, it's not present in these responses. Just quickly, you and Ambassador Bob Ray has an apartment in the same building as your old residence. Is Mr. Ray's apartment larger than your apartment?
I have no idea.
Did the U ambassador previous to Mr. Ray occupy the unit that was assigned to you?
The unit that was assigned to me at 550 Park Avenue was occupied by the previous UN ambassador.
Do you know why they were switched?
When Ambassador Ray came here, both were available. Both are properties belonging to Global Affairs Canada.
Does his unit need
he-
Does his unit need the major upgrades that would necessitate a move as well?
No.
Okay. Why is that? Was it brought up? It has full accessibility per Canadian standards. That's your understanding?
That's my understanding, but I'm no expert on the rules of accessibility. But my understanding is
Okay.
that property was maintained
Okay.
and renovated and is up to code.
Interesting. So they made a $9 million offer on this luxury condo, and you visited it on May the appraisal was done on May the 9th, but you visited it on April 26th. Why were you visiting a condo that an offer had been made on but hadn't been appraised? How did the price get arrived at? I know you're not an expert in real estate, but wouldn't you get it appraised before you make an offer?
I will tell you what I said in my opening statement. I had nothing to do with this process, first, middle, or last.
Look, Mr. Clark, you're Justin Trudeau's $9 million man. Canadians don't know what extra value they're getting for this $9 million. And frankly, your answers today do nothing to assuage the concerns of Canadians who are struggling just to feed themselves.
There, Council General, we do know within Parliament we have a wide range of views of our parliamentary colleagues. In fact, on the official opposition, we have members there who are actually for Brexit. They're not free traders. They don't believe in, a Canada-U.S. free trade agreement. They don't believe in free trade agreements with Europe. And we are seeing some of those views come out in the last little while. And it's unfortunate because we know the Canadian economy is an open economy. We know we prosper when we trade and we create linkages. And the attacks that we're seeing today on yourself, on our officials in terms of moving our relationship forward. You mentioned the countries in Europe that have expanded their footprint in the United States. And look, we as a country sold our presence in London for some money, where it was $100 or $200 million at the time. If you go back to London, UK today, that decision by the Harper government, that building's probably worth $1 billion, $1.5 billion in today's dollars. So much like the Conservatives have done here in the past in the province of Ontario with Highway 407, we see the same thing taking place with the Conservatives federally. They like to sell some Crown assets and take some money.
I need you to wrap up, Mr. Sabera. You're past your time.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And then claim that they're good fiscal stewards, which is completely false. Good to see everyone today, Chair. Thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing everyone one Monday back at Ottawa. Council General, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Mr. Sabera. Mr. Brock, please go ahead for 5. And colleagues, just we've only got a couple more interventions, but ask everyone please watch the clocks.
Mr. Clark, I've listened very carefully to your testimony over the last approximately hour and a half. You've stated on numerous occasions repeatedly that you simply had no involvement in the real estate process. But sorry, Mr. Clark, again, I've got proof. I've got more emails. I'm referring now to an email that was sent to both you and your spouse on July the 17th, 2024, requesting permission to visit your official residence with the contracted appraiser. Please advise if time works with you. Your wife responded the same date and said, yes, thanks. And then I also received a previous email indicating that the appraisers had been to your property the previous year, so either the spring or early summer of 2023 when the events unfolded as we have asked you. So they visited your property on 2 occasions. You were part of that process. Your spouse was part of that process, which really puts a different spin on your stated position numerous times that you simply had no involvement. Now, I want to go back to the 26th of April 2024 when you visited the penthouse, or the condominium, I should say, my apologies, on Billionaires Row. Who showed you the property?
Who showed me the property? It was the real estate agent couple of real estate agents, and I went with a couple of people from the mission.
Okay. And I'm sure that in your lifetime, Mr. Clark, you and your spouse have purchased property, personal property.
We have,
Right.
Mr. Chair.
No, sir, sir, this is my time. Sir,
talk about this, but do not bring my wife into this.
Sir, this is my time. I'm asking you the questions. Thank you. I'm merely referring to an
order,
email.
Chair. Point of order. Point of order.
Sorry, Mr. Brock, we have point of order. Go ahead.
Whether this is a point of order or not, let's have some decorum. The Consul General here has nothing to do with his family, nothing at all. It's very bad. Come on, let's get better. We're better than that, guys.
Thanks. Continue, Mr. Brock.
Vera should review the material that his party has received because clearly Mr. Clark's wife is referenced, and she, in fact, identifies herself by her first name. I'm not making this up. It's in the documents, Mr. Cervera. So going again, Mr. Clark, you've purchased property in the past probably numerous times with the assistance of real estate agents. They do their best to sell property to you, to highlight all the features of the property to you. Are you suggesting to Canadians that when you toured this Billionaires Row condominium that's right in front of Central Park, that they were completely muted and you simply walked around aimlessly, looking at all the features, not asking any questions, and them not highlighting certain features to you? Is that what you want Canadians to believe? Yes or no, Mr. Clark?
Oh, yes.
Wow. Wow. You have found the most inept real estate agent in the entire world. That is fascinating, Mr. Clark. Let me ask you this, Mr. Clark. Are you a golfer? Are you a golfer, sir? Are you a golfer?
Depends who you ask. Depends who you ask.
Okay. Are you a swimmer?
Depends who you ask.
And do you play pickleball?
No. I
Oh.
don't even know what it is.
I respect that.
Well,
As a tennis player, I respect
You've got two 25-meter swimming lanes in your new condominium. You've got a golf simulator. That's every man's dream to have that. That's right in your building, as well as you have paddle courts. Now, was it a requirement, sir, in your role as the Consul General for New York, to have the world's most expensive appliances?
Order, Mr. Chair.
For instance, the stove alone
Mr.
is
Brock.
some
Mr. Brock, sorry. Go ahead on the point of order, please.
I just think Mr. Brock said it's every man's dream to have a golf simulator, and I just want to clarify on the record that it is not my dream.
Okay.
And I prefer if you didn't misrepresent
could we not descend
people's.
to this? Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
So, Mr. Clark, is it a requirement of your position to have a $19,000 oven, a $13,000 refrigerator, a $4,600 coffee maker, an $11,000 freezer? Is that a requirement of your position, sir, or did you ask for that?
Nope.
Enjoy it.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you for keeping your composure. Thank you. I noticed at times you went red and you took your glasses off and you kind of, shook your head. And I just wanted to also apologize on behalf of our side.
Mr. Clark, you've asserted several times in this meeting that you had no role in either the sale of the old property or the purchase of the new one. I'm a little bit confused by, the fact that you toured the new apartment after the offer had been made, before the deal had closed. Was that the first time that you became aware of the sale and purchase process by Global Affairs?
As head of mission, I was aware that there was a process underway, but I was not part of that process. Nobody came in and talked to me about what they were looking at or the type of money they were talking about. The only thing I ever knew at the, when I got toured, I'm curious, I wanted to see what it was that they were looking at, having made the offer to it. But
fair enough. Fair enough.
you know,
I was getting what I was trying to get at was whether you were apprised that there was a process taking place, and you've answered that yes, you were aware that there was a process. So when the appraiser showed up at the old residence and your wife gave them access, it wasn't a surprise to her. It wasn't a surprise to you to find out that had happened. When were you first apprised of Global Affairs' intention to sell the old property and purchase a new property?
It would have been, and allow me to look at my notes, it would have been April 12th when they had put that conditional offer on. I want to make it very clear, and you're quite right. As head of mission, I was aware that there was a process going on. I was not part of that process, but I knew it was going on. I had no idea of timing or what they were looking at or anything. The only thing I knew about the process at the end was that this was going to return $7 million or more to Canadian taxpayers, which is why I thought it was a good idea.
So you were first apprised of this process April 12th, which coincided with the date the offer was made on the new property?
Yeah, I believe so, but it was simply that at that point, somebody, I believe, had told me that they had put an offer in on this particular property.
Okay, and that notification was made to you verbally. There's no documentation in which Global Affairs reaches out to you and says, "By the way, we've put an offer on this property."
No.
Thanks very much. We have
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Backrack. We now have Mr. Genuis and then Mr. Baines. Go ahead, Mr. Genuis.
Mr. Clark, your story, which we don't believe, but your story is that you were not involved in the purchase. But once you saw the place, the amenities, the luxuries, you did tour it after all, why didn't you say no? Why didn't you report back and say this is way too much at a time when Canadians are struggling? You could have at that point said something to someone about this decision, and you didn't. Why did you choose not to, sir?
When they told me that we were giving $7 million back to Canadian taxpayers, I thought that was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, but that's comparing apples to oranges, and we've talked about how absurd those numbers are before. Did they tell you those were the numbers at the time, sir?
Yeah.
They told you in
listen,
April.
It could be more than $7 million. It
well,
could be $8 million.
That's
million.
That's quite something since the property wasn't listed for months and months afterwards. But your testimony today is that you were told at the time in April the magnitude of their estimated alleged savings. So we'll probably want to follow up on that claim you've just made. Sir, I have a few more questions about your background. Minister Jolie has appointed you twice, at least. The first time was when she was Heritage Minister, and then she appointed you again when she was Foreign Affairs Minister. She first appointed you to chair an advisory committee to recommend appointments while she was Minister of Heritage, appointments that included the CBC. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. What was the period over which you held that position?
I think it was about 4 months.
Okay. Did you recommend the appointment of Catherine Tate?
I recommended two candidates, and the government chose.
Okay, she was one of them?
Yep.
Okay. You were recommending candidates for the board of CBC as well. Did you recommend the appointment of Mr. Harley Finkelstein?
Yes.
Okay. Were any of your children employed by Mr. Finkelstein's company at the time when you recommended the appointment?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that seem like a problem to you?
Mr. Finkelstein is one of Canada's greatest entrepreneurs.
He might be a great guy, sir. I've never met him, but the point is, your members of your immediate family were employed by him, and you used a position in government to recommend him for a position at the same time as members of your family were on the board, and you didn't recuse yourself from that discussion.
Our family was not on the board of Shopify.
No, but they were employees of his company.
Employees, yes.
Yes, okay.
But not on the board, as you
right,
stated.
right. You recommended him to the board while members of your family were his employees. That's on the record, and people can now make their judgments. Sir, you were a journalist until 2017. Is that correct?
I didn't recommend him to the board. Which board are you talking about?
Okay, I think we're past this now, and I have limited time. You testified that you recommended him to be on the board of CBC. Now, you were a journalist until 2017. Is that correct?
Point of order, Chair. Can I have point of
It was
order?
on a list of names.
Point of order.
Excuse me, point of order. Go ahead, please, on the point of order.
I want to ask about relevance. Relevance in terms of where Mr. Jennis is going with this has nothing to do with anything with regards to the residents in New York City. This is asking the Consul General about past matters in his life and in past roles. This has absolutely nothing to do with the topic at hand here at this committee. And I know Mr. Jennis likes to go down these paths and become like some sort of spy detective, but let's get serious here. There's no relevance here, Garnett.
Okay, Mr. Sabera, we always allow
Can
very
I just comment on this point of order, Chair?
I think we'd like to just get to our time. Mr. Sabera, it's not a point of order, but go ahead, Mr. Genuis.
Well, just on the point of order, I think there are a lot of questions today about Mr. Clark's credibility and his close connections with the government. The fact that Minister Jolie appointed him twice and that he was able to recommend people with whom he had close connections when he was in one of those positions. And now he's in this new appointed position. He's living in this. He's receiving the benefits associated with this $9 million residence. I think these things are very much relevant to the questions of credibility that are involved. But I have a minute and a half left. Is that right?
1 minute.
Sorry, I'm commenting on the point of order, though. This wasn't part of my time, or.
Yes, it was.
Cutting into my time.
Okay, Chair. I don't think that was clear. Very quickly, you were a journalist until 2017. During the 2011 election campaign, a member of your family had a senior position within the Liberal National Campaign. Did you disclose that at the time?
Disclose to whom?
To the public.
It was not relevant.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'd like to now move a motion. The motion is that Minister Jolie be asked to appear before the committee before the Thanksgiving break to answer questions about actions, policies, and plans related to GAC's real property portfolio in other countries and any other issues related to the committee's mandate, and further that the committee invite Emily Nicholson to appear. Having gotten that motion moved in the time, I'll now speak to it.
Thanks. Let me interrupt briefly. Have you sent that copy to the clerk?
Yes, the clerk has it, I believe,
we
in
will
both
distribute it out.
both official languages.
Please go ahead, sir.